This is a video tutorial on how to write a program in C# that calculates the force exerted on an object due to gravity using the famous equation F equals ma. So we'll start off with coming up with a design report, just a notepad. Now, because we're using the equation F equals m times a, actually it'll be g, we immediately can see that we're going to require three variables, and we need to decide on what type those variables will hold, whether it's going to be an integer, a float, a double, a char, string, bool. Generally, we know that the force of gravity will take it to be 9.81. The fact that there's a decimal point in there shows us that an integer is not going to really do much, because we need to be able to have that decimal point in there. So the gravity constant should be stored in a double. We want the user to be able to enter a mass, and we don't want to really limit it to just integral masses, so we'll store that in a double also. And then obviously if we multiply the double by the double, we're going to want a force to be a double also. We could use a float. A float just would allow us to have smaller numbers, so we'll stick to a double here. So the first part of our design report would be the types. So types, we've decided that F, M, and G are going to be doubles. That was pretty easy. We need to decide how the information will be dealt with. So the mass will be user entered. The gravity will have to be hard-coded into our program, because the program's just going to perform the calculation. We're not going to ask the user to enter that. So part of our design will be to hard-code the gravity. It's going to be a constant of the program. And the force will be calculated by our program, and it will be output by the program. So let's think about the step-by-step process that's going to take place here. Initially, I guess we'll decide at this point that there's going to be two text boxes and one button in our program. The first text box will take the input from the user, calculate the force, and output the force into another text box. So first step would be that the user enters a mass. We want to take, before we can perform any calculations on the user entered data, we need to put it into a form that we can perform numerical calculations on. Anything entered into a text box is a string by default, even if it is a numerical value. So it's simply a symbol. So we want to take the string and convert it and we're going to convert it to a double, because that's what we decided. If we would have decided it was going to be an integer, we'd convert it into an int 32. So after we have converted it, we want to perform the calculation. So multiply input by the gravity, which we decided is going to be 9.81. And then we want to store this result in our variable f. Now before we can output it back into the text box, we can't output a numerical value. We can only, a text box will only hold a string. So we need to convert our result, or convert f to a string and then output it. To our text box. So now we know what we're doing. All that has been decided before we even started C#. So let's start C# here. We'll start a new project, and it's a Windows form because that's what we're dealing with in this course. Your textbook has a lot of examples of console applications. You can try writing this program in a console app if you'd like, but we'll just stick to user interfaces. So we'll name our program Force. And it's a good idea to immediately save your program right away. You have two ways to do that. You can click on File, Save All, or you can use the shortcut icon. I'm just going to save it to the desktop. And now there's no possibility it's going to get lost. So we're going to drop a button onto our form and the text box, actually two. If you have if you're writing a program with a lot of text boxes, you can just copy and then paste. And you'll notice C# lets you know when things are aligned. So if you want to get fancy and make sure all your objects on your form are aligned, you can pay attention to those. If you want to move, if you don't like where it's positioned, you can just highlight everything and reposition it. If you just want to reposition a few of them, you can do that. And we'll just resize this form so it'll fit on our screen. Before writing any code is when you should name all the elements or all the objects of your form immediately that you're going to be referring to in code with meaningful names. So we'll start off with this text box. That's going to be our input. We could call it input, or in this case I'm going to call it mass because it just gives us some more of an idea of what is taken into that text box. And I like to always write for a text box txt at the beginning so that I know right away when I'm looking at the code that it is a text box. You can choose to write txtbx. It's up to you, just as long as it does give some meaning to it. So our first text box will be